in Job 27, Job 27 is a chapter that makes a solemn declaration, okay? And after enduring criticism from his friends and pain from his suffering, Job now speaks with clarity and conviction here. And this is his final speech, like I have been saying, in the third cycle of dialogues. So they had 3 dialogues as we went through. And Job stands firm, not in arrogance, but in integrity. He refuses to falsely confess sins he has not committed, even if it would make things easier for the conversation. He also offers a sobering reflection on the fate of the wicked. So this chapter invites us to consider, what does it look like to remain faithful in the face of false accusations and prolonged suffering? Let's listen to Job's voice here as he clings to righteousness while still acknowledging God's justice. All right, here we go. Job 27. And Job continued to discourse. As surely as God lives, who has denied me justice? The Almighty, who has made me taste bitterness of soul, as long as I have life within me, the breath of God in my nostrils, and my lip will not speak wickedness, and my tongue will utter no deceit. I will never admit you are in the right. Till I die, I will not deny my integrity. I will maintain my righteousness and never let go of it. My conscience will not reproach me as long as I live. May my enemies be like the wicked, my adversaries like the unjust. For what hope has the godless when he is cut off? When God takes away his life, does God listen to his cry? When distress comes upon him, will he find delight in the Almighty? Will he call upon God at all times? I will teach you about the power of God. The ways of the Almighty I will not conceal. You have all seen this yourselves. Why this meaningless talk? Here is the fate God allots to the wicked. The heritage a ruthless man receives from the Almighty. However, many his children, their fate is the sword. His offspring will never have enough to eat. The plague will bury those who survive him, and their widows will not weep for them. Though he heaps up silver like dust, and clothes like piles of clay, what he lays up, the righteousness will wear, and the innocent will divide it, his silver. The house he builds is like a moth's cocoon, like a hut made by a watchman. He lies down wealthy, but will do so no more. When he opens his eyes, all is gone. Terrors overtake him like a flood. A tempest snatches him away in the night. The east wind carries him off, and he is gone. He sweeps him out of his place. It hurls itself against him without mercy. As he flees headlong from its power, it claps its hands in derision and hisses him out of the place. So that's our chapter for today, for this part. Okay, there's a lot packed here, and rightly so. He has a great response and a great rebuke here, but yeah, and I love how he holds on to his integrity as he defends himself. So okay, so in Job's in this section from verses 1 through 6, it's Job's vow of integrity. And in verse 2 he says, "As surely as God lives, who has denied me justice?" So, knowing that God is infinite, he's he's the beginning and the end, the Alpha and Omega. So like, knowing that, like, he would have known that. So saying, God lives forever, and so who would deny me this justice? So that's just something to think about in that respect. But Job opens with an oath here, swearing by God's life. Yet notice this tension. He accuses God of kind of denying him this justice, and still swears by his name, though. So this is not blasphemy, and this is just raw faith wrestling with pain. He's using, yes, he's using his name, but he has something to which God is supposed to respond to. It's a little bit, it's definitely accusatory, like I said, but and that's kind of dangerous, but it's not blasphemy, So so an image for this is, my conscience will not reproach me as long as I live, in verse 6. It's a shield of integrity. So Job refuses to confess to lies just to appease others or escape his own suffering. And this reflection shows us that faith doesn't just mean surrendering that false guilt. Sometimes righteousness means standing firm even when you are misunderstood. And so in verse 5 we saw, let me not deny my integrity. So Job is holding on to his himself fast, and not because he thinks he's sinless, but because he knows he's not guilty of what his friends were accusing him of. So in verses 7 through 12 we saw Job's warning to the wicked. This is pretty essential, because if we're not in right standing of God, this is very, very true. May my enemy be like the wicked, my adversary like the unjust, in verse 7. So here Job pivots. He makes clear that he still believes God judges the wicked, just not on his friend's timeline. So there's a powerful image in verse 9, which says, will God hear his cry when distress comes upon him? So a silent heaven to a desperate cry. That's the imagery we see here. But it means that Job warns what the wicked cannot manipulate. They cannot manipulate God's mercy in a moment of a crisis. So when the wicked fall into that moment, that last moment, they cannot save themselves. So Job is not softening his stance on justice. He still believes in a moral universe. He just won't let his friends weaponize that against him, which I think is admirable. In verse 11, we see, I will teach you about the power of God. It's a bold twist. Job claims authority over his friends. Despite their rebukes, he reminds them of truths about God they've ignored, especially that God's justice is often mysterious and delayed. So in verses 13 through 23, we see the fate of the wicked, and this is where we also need to take heed. This is important because the wicked, in verse 13 it says, this is the portion of the wicked man with God. So Job gives a poetic and intense description here of the downfall of the wicked. It's dramatic but not personal. He's not talking about himself or even his friends. He's warning about this universal truth of those who would be wicked, those considered wicked, those in disbelief of what God can do for us. Job gives Job gives a vivid image in verse 21. It says, the east wind carries him off and he is gone. So this is like a storm that sweeps the wicked away. It's like, whew, like sudden, evil may seem strong for a time, but in the end it collapses suddenly and completely. It'll be a swift end. Job's confidence in God's justice hasn't died. It's just been refined by pain. So his trust is long-term, and it's not transactional. And that's important. We don't want to have a transactional view of God or for God in our relationships. In our relationship with God, we don't want that transactional mindset. He claps his hands in derision and hisses him out of his place. Verse 23. So even society will one day reject the person it once honored, if their life was built on that injustice. So that's important to nail down. So let's look at 3 points of application for this, okay? So integrity is not arrogance. Job refuses to falsely confess to crimes he didn't commit. He's not prideful. He's just honest. And so stand firm in your integrity. Even if others don't understand, God values truthfulness over appeasement. The second is, don't misuse God's justice. So Job's friends weaponize this theology to accuse. Job reminds them only God sees all and judges rightly. So be slow to assume why others are suffering. Let God be the judge. We are called to be compassionate witnesses. So, the third thing is justice will come, but not always when we expect. So though Job feels abandoned, he still believes the wicked will not last. And so we should trust in God's justice even when it seems delayed. God's timing is perfect. We need to remember that, even when ours is impatient. So, yeah. So let's kind of encourage us with this chapter. That this chapter is a testimony of that endurance that he's wearing or facing. So in the face of pain, slander, and divine silence, Job doesn't fake repentance to end his suffering. He's not going to fake it. He clings to his integrity and to the God he still believes in. His declaration is one of deep, bruised faith. I will not deny my integrity, he says. And as we face trials or are tempted to compromise for the sake of just comfort, may we remember Job's example here. True faith doesn't always have answers, but it does have honesty and integrity, of course, and trust that is in God's justice. Though delayed, it will never be denied. Okay? This is what our trust is in, ultimately. Let's keep walking in that kind of faith.